So we got 2 more Sundays left in the closing part of our year. This Sunday and next Sunday. Next Sunday, as I indicated, is Christ the King Sunday. We've been talking about this morning about getting together to decorate and the hanging of the greens, and especially getting our Advent candle out. That's just around the corner, y'all. That's what's coming up. So, before we start all over again at the beginning, we should first come to a proper conclusion. We have been in the 25th, we have been in Matthew's Gospel for a long time. We've been looking at parables, different things, but mostly parables. And I have a choice this morning as to whether I want to, before we go to Christ the King Sunday, whether I want to look more at, and we'll see, I might do a little bit next Sunday, but either last Sunday or this Sunday, we got the choice of the bridesmaids, the 10 bridesmaids, or the 10 talents. Y'all probably, I don't know, heard as many sermons as I have on the talents. I've got a couple of them, and I think one or one and a half of them might be sort of good. But I like the bridesmaids better because it's really more, I think, of where we are. To begin with, Matthew chapter 25 is one of the more remarkable chapters of the New Testament. It is actually the ending of this large block of Jesus' teaching, a second big block in Matthew's Gospel. This just seems to be the way that Matthew wanted to organize his Gospel. If you have one of those red print Bibles, where it gives you Jesus' words in red prints, notice how almost all of the writing since chapter 23, almost all of it, is pretty much solid red. Then you get to where we are, chapter 25 this morning, and you turn the page to chapter 26, and all of a sudden you see way more black. There's a little red scattered. But the narrative continues, see? The story is not just teaching. In other words, we re-enter the story, the events that are taking place, upcoming, the anointing at Bethany, and y'all know Judas is sitting over in the corner looking at that. So, what's next? Judas planned to betray Jesus. What's right around the corner? Oh, well, there's the Last Supper. There's Peter's denial. We got all this stuff that's about to come up as the consummating final events of the Christ story. But before we get to these final events, in the same way that Matthew gives us a large section of Jesus' teaching shortly after the opening of his gospel, in the form of the Sermon on the Mount. That's a place where you can turn back to chapter 5, 6, 7. And what is it? Solid red. No story, no narrative. Solid red. Just teaching. Matthew again gives us another rather large section of Jesus' teaching shortly before he ends his gospel. So, this final chapter of solid red, chapter 25, concerns the kingdom of God and the final fulfillment. You hear this? The final fulfillment toward which the world is moving. Let's read this story, Matthew 25, the parable of the 10 bridesmaids. 25, verse 1. Then the kingdom of heaven will be like this. 10 bridesmaids took their lamps and went to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish, 5 were wise. When the foolish, notice they keep starting with the foolish. This is a story about the foolish. Have y'all noticed that? When the foolish took their lamps, they took no oil with them. Sort of an afterthought, but the wise took a flask of oil with their lamps. As the bridegroom was delayed, all of them became drowsy and slept. But at midnight, there was a shout. Look, here's the bridegroom. Come out to meet him. Then all those bridegrooms got up and trimmed their lamps. The foolish said to the wise, give me some of your oil, for our lamps are going out. But the wise replied, no, there will not be enough for you and for us. By the way, this is a little mini sermon right here. I always stop when there's little mini sermons in there. This little mini sermon says, you know how we Christians are all about this. You better share what you got, and so forth and so on. When God has you make certain preparations about things, and you have prepared for yourself, and it's a preparation. It's not an under preparation, it's not an over preparation. It's sort of like the idea of we need enough lamp for our oils, but we don't need 5,000 gallons. You can go on either side of this. But here's what I would have you notice. This is a story from Jesus. And here are these 10 bridesmaids in here. 5 of them wise, 5 of them foolish. And the 5 foolish ones say, good Christian, preparation people who've got their act together. Can we have some of your oil? And what was the answer? No! That's the mini sermon. Here we go. No, there will be enough for you. There will not be enough for you and for us. You had better go to the dealer and buy some for yourselves. And while they went to buy it, the bridegroom came. And those who were ready, most important words here, went with him into the wedding banquet, and the door was shut. Later, the other bridesmaids came also, saying, Lord, Lord, open to us. But he replied, truly I tell you, I do not know you. In a story. Then Jesus adds, keep awake therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour. The word of God for the people of God. Jesus begins by saying, then the kingdom of heaven will be like this. 10 bridesmaids took their lamps and went to meet the bridegroom. Now this story, this parable, reflects Jewish wedding customs. Now I've told you a little bit about that before. Oh, elaborate. I think I have actually stood in the pulpit and said something like, if you think your wedding was too long, you should be Jewish. Because their weddings last sometimes a week, 2 weeks. They carry on and do all kinds of things. A lot of it's a little, hide and seek involved in it. That's what's going on here. You never do know. It's the excitement of the expectation and when it's going to happen. And, there's even a little bit of surprise in this thing in that how many of y'all would show up at 12 midnight to get married? Well, anyway, on how this goes down. It's just an example that you never know when the bridegroom, it's full of symbolism, y'all. I mean, this is not a real event. This is a parable. It's full of symbolism. In fact, the wedding banquet, I find it surprising actually, the wedding banquet is a New Testament symbol for the kingdom. The bridegroom represents the Lord of the church, and the bridesmaids represent his disciples. Okay? So when the 5 foolish maidens are locked out of the banquet hall, they very simply represent those would-be followers of Jesus who miss out on the kingdom. Why? Why? Now, it's always been a little strange to me that the focus of this story is on the 5 foolish maidens. You notice that? This is a story more concerned about the losers than the winners. I mean, it's pretty much right the opposite way we would focus the story. Because y'all know it, we'd be interviewing the winners, wouldn't we? We'd be interviewing the winners. Can you tell me, bridesmaid number 1, what kind of insight and rigorous training did you have to endure in order to get your lamps filled? I was just really blessed. No! That is not what this parable wants us to think about. The concern is for the lost. By focusing the story on the 5 foolish maidens, we are forced to ask the question, well, just how did they miss out? How did they miss out? Well, the answer to that is rather simple. They are short-sighted. They are unprepared. They ain't got a plan. They're muddle-headed. I don't know. They just don't have it all together now, do they? Do they? Now, the Quakers, yeah, you know those folks on the oatmeal box? The Quakers, they're really an interesting group of a faith group that's really interesting. The Quakers use a striking word that applies to these maidens. The Quakers often talk about all theirs. It's one word. All theirs. In the Christian life, it is really important that we be truly present to what's going on now, to what's going on then, or what's going on then. You see? It's a all there-ness is a looking in all directions. The wise and the foolish bridesmaids, they represent pretty much 2 types of people. One type is people who are all there. The other type is people who aren't all there. Really simple, right? I don't know, I tend to think in duads a lot, you know, so that I guess you could call these people doers and reactors. That's how I tend to divide the bridesmaids. Doers and reactors. In fact, I divide a lot of people into doers and reactors. Reactors are people who simply don't have control of their lives. They're just waiting for things to happen so they can react. They're kind of like a ball, y'all. They bounce from one predicament to another, always reactive, seldom ever feeling any kind of control. The reason why they react rather than do is they have no real vision. You know? They don't have a plan. You know? Now, one thing, sometimes I know all of you got your own Bibles, and I don't know when's the last time, we had the Gideons here last Sunday. But he talked about it, where you pick up that little Bible. There's a couple of different ways to get at it, but I've looked at that. Have y'all ever read in the little Gideon Bible back there where it says, the plan of salvation? Your conviction, you're convicted of your sin. You realize that you're a sinful person? That's the first part of the plan. That's just about the biggest part of any plan where you're going to make improvements, whether you're a Christian or an alcoholic. You stand up in front of God and everybody and go, you know what, I got a problem. I need to make some changes. I don't know if y'all ever been to an AA meeting. Do you know what? Every person who really goes through that, the first thing they have to do before God and everybody? They have to stand up in front of God and everybody and say, what? I am an alcoholic and I need help. That's where they start. What's next? Okay. Plan of salvation, what's next? There's redemption. And then finally, on down in life, we get to sanctification. I ain't got time for all of this. Y'all know this. I hope you do. It's a plan. It's a plan. plan. Since folks who are reactors, they are not on a steady course. They're easily pushed around, and even like our parable this morning, they get locked out. We're here. I'm sorry. Doers, on the other hand, are people of vision. They got a plan. It doesn't mean that their plan doesn't change a little bit and you know, you have to do a little bit this and that on this side of it. Or my best term I like is what I call long-term intentionality. Long-term intentionality. I mean, I know that we make plans and we think and we live it one day at a time. One of the best words I've ever heard, I heard a guy, old preacher man, say to me one day, he was about 90-something years old, like my granddaddy would say, he was old enough to be dead. He said, he said to me one day, he said, I lived my life as if I could die half a second ago. I said, yes, sir. He says, I planned my life as if I'm going to live to be 101. And he was 90-something. I said, well, I turned to him and said, well, you might need to plan a little past 101. Who knows? Doers are people of vision. They got a plan. Long-term intentionality. You know, do you think of your life and the way that you plan things? Are you more of a checkers player? You play checkers with your life, or do you play chess? Checkers, you think about one or two, maybe three moves in a row. Maybe you good checker players do. Most checker players play how? One move at a time. Based on what? What the other person does. Now, if you've ever really played chess, my Uncle Kurt taught me to play chess. He taught me to play chess by beating me every time. It's a terrible experience, but I learned how to play chess. You have to think 6, 7, 10 moves ahead, y'all. You got to have a plan. You got to see how things affect from now to the future. You have to have an imagination. I mean, yeah, you know, doers, they get bumped around, they get surprised, just like everybody else. But they do not get knocked off course. No. Doers know how to lay out a plan and follow it. How to estimate, how to re-estimate, how to prepare, how to keep the lamp burning. Whatever that means for you. Now, as Christians, we're called to think about where history is moving. Yeah, this is a sermon I was going to preach right after the election. I guess it still is, isn't it? We are called to think about where history is moving. And that means we got to have vision. We got to have a plan. God is a God of history. Y'all ever notice that? God is a God of change. God always has a plan. Whether it's an individual life, a congregation, a nation, or the whole human race. God has got a plan for it. Through the blessing of God's wisdom and grace, do we have enough all-there-ness to see where history is moving? And do you do a little check and balances on the way you think about that? As you sit here in November of 2020 and you think about what it's going to be like on January 15th of 2021, let's describe your vision in your head and what you think it's going to be like. And then when we get to January 15th, let's see how close you are. And that will reveal wisdom about how you think about things and whether or not you are truly all there. To prepare for the kingdom that is coming. To have a vision of what the future might be. How your actions affect the outcome. Do we got a plan? Do we have that kind of vision? And I mean, it comes across in big things and little things. It comes across in everything. If that's who you are. Let me tell y'all a granddaddy story. That ought to surprise you to death, right? My granddaddy, back in the spring of 1939, walked into the Lee County Co-op. And there, lined up on the cabinet or up on the shelf up there, was all of these little bitty green sprigs and little bitty individuals. There's boxes of them. But in the spring of 1939, my grandfather was given several of these little cuttings of this wonderful new plant. I mean, it had the prettiest little flowers on it, and it was so green. It was green. Well, my granddaddy planted it next to an old shed out back of the house. After a while, this plant began to take off. And you know how you tell your granddaddy and grandmama stories? You have to always use the right words, the same words to tell the story. This is one of them right now. He run in the house one day, as the story was always told, and he said to my mama, he says, you need to come out here and look at this green stuff growing. He says, that stuff grows like Jack in the Beanstalk. Next, he put him up some wires so that this wonderful new plant could have a place to grow. Well, in less than 2 weeks, the plant was beginning to take over the shed. One day, my granddaddy walked around into the front yard and saw a sprout coming out from under the front porch of the house. His comment was heard by my Uncle Kurt as a boy. My granddaddy was a good Christian man, and he didn't say too many dirty words or express this about as close as he ever got. My granddaddy's words of vision were, oh, Dad dirty, no you don't. He immediately went to the shed, anywhere in the yard for the next week, 2 weeks, digging it up, dug it up, dig it up, dug it up. This wonderful new plant. He decided in the spring of 1939 that he didn't want nothing to do with it. And by the way, if you ain't guessed by now, the name of this story is Granddaddy and the Kudzu. And as some of y'all who attended the banquet, actually years later when we were driving up to Ponticola, he looked out the truck window and he says, it's too late now, Keith. I said, sir? Of course, he's 80-something years old. He says, too late now, Keith. I said, what? He says, the world is covered in cuts. I wrote a song about that. In the history of our nation, we see a mixture of short-sightedness and far-sightedness. There were those who plundered the earth, watched it wash away, made kudzu seem like a good idea at the time. Talk about people with limited vision. There were those who plundered the earth, and there were the Johnny Appleseeds, so to speak. You know what I mean? And I'd also like to think folks like my granddaddy. So many of the blessings that we now enjoy came about because of folks with vision. Because of, here's your terminology, philanthropic endeavors of far-sighted citizens. Philanthropic endeavors of far-sighted citizens. You know, folks like Carnegie and folks like that. Philanthropic, concern for your fellow human being, concern for Mother Earth. That demonstrates a vision of the coming King. See, when we support our church and work for its betterment, we're making an investment in the future. When that lady back there on the back row gets those kids together over there in that room over there and holds them together in their faith, she's making an investment in our future. We're being people of vision, y'all. It's good to have the church at our side. Y'all know that. So that it's always there, ready to help our friends, our neighbors. Oh, by the way, I had a lady named Doris Reed that pulled up in my driveway yesterday afternoon. She said to tell all of y'all, especially you two, howdy. Y'all know who Doris Reed is? That was Brother Reed's daughter. Yeah. I pulled in behind her and she had a Florida tag. She acted like she didn't know where she was going, Lena. And you know, when people turn down our road, they're either up to no good or they've lost. You know? So I sort of pulled around her and pulled down there and I got out. She slowly pulled up in the driveway and I turned and I said to her, I said, well, either you bad lost or all of this means something to you. She says, I'm Doris Reed. My parents used to live here. I said, yeah, I know all about it. I've even got a picture of what it looked like when they lived here. We got to have vision, y'all. It's good to have church at our side. Folks who connect with us. The writer of Proverbs was absolutely spot on when he said, where there is no vision. Y'all know the rest of that verse? Where there is no vision, the people perish. 29:18. Now, on the individual level, the questions for today are you getting ready? Can you see where history is moving for you, for us, for the world, for our nation? You know, January 31st, how surprised are you going to be? People of vision know. They know that God's time for them will finally come. That all this stress and strain and worried about blood clots and children and babies and grandbabies and COVID and promise will give way to fulfillment. Y'all hear that? Preparation will culminate in realization. And I'm glad that I don't know what it's like and you don't know what it's like, and it's going to be beyond our imagination. But you gotta have a plan. The bridegroom came, said Jesus, and those who were ready went with him into the